24. So this week in maths, we're going to continue our recap of some of the skills that we've learned previously during the year. And we're going to try and tie it into some of the aspects we talked about more recently, like decimals. The first two are very similar to something we've done with the decimals. I just want to show you a few different ways to show the same thing, just in case the other way didn't quite click with you. And then we'll move on to something we did right at the beginning of the year. So the first lesson is about timesing by 10 and 100. Now, the first easy way to show this is when you're looking at Deans. So here's a question, pause now, have a go, and then come back and I'll explain what I mean by this. Okay, so this is quite an easy way to show how, when you're timesing by tens or hundreds, why it does what it does. So first one we've got 5 times of one block. So at this point, we gather 5 1 blocks together, and the total we have is 5. So we'd have 5 ones, which equals 5. This time we're getting 5 10 bars, and at this point we have 5 of them together. That's 5 tens, which is 50. Then we've got 5 times 100 block, so we have 500 blocks, 500 or 500. So this quite easily shows how, when you're timesing by 10, why you need to times by 10. And you can quite easily see the progression. So another thing that we could use to show this is that we can use our place value counters on our place value grid in order to show the movement of how that works. So we've got 3 times 10 and 3 times 100. Have a go at thinking about how that might look, discuss if there is somebody with you to discuss about it, and then we'll go through it. Pause now. Okay, so let's have a quick look at how this might look when moving forwards. So here are the answers, and what we're doing here is we've got 3 times 10. So here are my 3 ones. Now each of those 3 ones need to become tens, not ones. So you would make 1 1 into 10, and you do the same with all 3 of them. So all 3 move from being ones to tens. So each one is 10. So in this case, that moves them across into the tens column, and we have our 3 tens. Now this is very similar to something we've done before, which we'll come back to later. But you can see the essence here of how we do that, why we move when we're timesing by 10, why we move it one step. Because what we're doing is we're changing each one of those ones into 10, or we're changing each one of the tens into 100. The same goes for when you're timesing by 100. We have 3 ones to begin with. We're timesing each one of those by 100. So each one of those ones becomes 100. And you can see there that all 3 move across into hundreds column, and you get 300. And again, if we go back to what we talked about before, you can see that when we're timesing by 10, it's this one step. When we're timesing by 100, it's 2 steps. Okay, so another way we can look at this is to model it using a bar model. How can we do this, and why is this useful? Well, actually, this way is very easy for us to see how each one becomes 10. So let's have a look at the question. It's 6 times 10. Have a go at seeing if you can create a bar model that helps you show this, and then we'll talk through it and we'll explain it that way. Pause now and try it. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is create a bar model that will help us. So here's my bar model. I've got 6 ones, 6 items. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got my 6 blocks along here. That's my bar. 6 long, because that's what I'm going to, that's my base. And what it's saying is I'm timesing by 10. which means I'm making each one of these individual blocks worth 10 rather than just worth 1. So this one becomes worth 10. The next one over becomes 10. The next one 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 becomes 10. So what you can see here is that each one of our 6 blocks now has a value of 10 rather than 1. That's timesing it by 10. It's increasing the value by 10. And then we can add them all up together and see in total we have 60. And this is a very easy way of showing why, when we timesing by 10, we're increasing that number by that. And this is just a nice, easy way to see it. And you can use this to your advantage when you're trying to visualize a question as well. So finally, we come back to our place value grid. And what I've done is included our decimals, my tenths and my hundredths, and my decimal point that runs here. Because we've spoken about this before, what happens when we times by 10 or we times by 100. And the rule is always the same. So if I put a 1 in the ones column and I want to times it by 10, I have to move it 1 column getting bigger. So that moves that 1 into the next column up. And that we know is timesing by 1. So when we're timesing, the direction we are always moving in is in this direction. When we're timesing by 10, it's 1 step. So if we're timesing by 10, we are going just 1 step. If we're timesing by 100, how many steps do we jump? Well, if I was to have 1 in my 10th column, which is over here, and this is what we did before when we were looking at the decimals, we can times it by 10 to get timesing by 10. But to get to timesing by 100, we have to times it by 10 again. So timesing by 100 is the same thing as timesing by 10, then timesing by 10 again. Now we know timesing by 10 is 1 step. So if we're timesing by 100, we know that timesing by 100 is the same thing as timesing by 10 and then timesing by 10. So how many steps do we think? Yeah, 2 steps. So what we need to do is we would move this one step here and the second step here. So once again, that 1 would end up in our 10th column. So as long as you follow this rule for timesing by 10 and 100, you can't really go wrong. And it doesn't matter if your number is a decimal, if your number has that 0 in the end. The one thing you must remember is the place value, the placeholders. And remember, our placeholder is always with 0. It just tells us that there is nothing in that column. So when this 1 here moves from our 1s column to our 10s column, it opens up this here, and we must put our place value in it, which is the 0, and that makes the number 10. Okay. So what I've done here is I've given you some questions which are timesing by 10, some that are timesing by 100, and then I've also left it open with 2 extra questions on here, which you have to work out where you're timesing by 10, timesing by 100, and what the answer might be. Have a go, see how you do, and we'll see you in the next video.